Hello, everybody. My name is Hello. Welcome back to this series where we're dealing with programming and design patterns in Python. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the abstract factory pattern. So, in the previous episode, we actually talked about what a factory is. If you have not seen that episode, I highly suggest you to go watch that video and then come back because this is going to be building on top of factory itself. So, what an abstract factory is a factory of factories. So instead of creating one object is what we did in factories, we're actually going to be creating families of related objects together. Okay. So rather than me creating just one object over here, we're going to be creating multiple objects. Okay. And these objects are related together. Okay. For example, how we can start this is, let's say we have two users, right? So all around the world, let's just ignore Linux. So either you have Windows or you have a Mac, right? So either you have a Windows or you have a Mac. Now, as a graphic designer, I'm going to be designing separately for each of these platforms, for example. So let's say I have a text box, right? And I have a button. Okay. Similarly, a Mac will also have a text box. It will also have a button, but the properties of this button will be different. So as a graphic designer for Windows, I'll have a different set of text boxes and buttons, and for Mac, I'll be having a different text box and button. Maybe not from a designer point of view, maybe from somebody who's developing UI, for example, right? So I will have different things depending on which platform I'm developing in, and each of these text box for Windows will have its own properties. The button for Windows will have its own properties. Mac similarly, that'll be there. So the problem here would be, so in case I have to properly define and get things working, I would actually have to go ahead and instantiate the text box and the button for Windows and Mac. So what happens is, let's say I have a button and this will be something like Windows button. Then I'd have to do a text box also. So text box will be Windows text box, something like that. Okay. The problem will be is in one particular case, if for example, by mistake, instead of putting button as Windows button and text box as Windows text box, if I change this to Mac text box, my code will break because this and this are not compatible with each other. So we should not let the user define this from their point of view. All they're going to be doing is just doing something like GUI kit, and then they'll just give the platform here. So they'll say something like Windows. Then from our end, we are just going to return them the Windows text box and the Windows button. So it'll be similar to whatever we did here. Here we just return one of this, but here in our case we're going to be returning multiple of these objects. Okay, and that is what factory of factories mean. Instead of just creating one object, we will create families of related objects together. Okay, I hope you're able to understand what we talked about till now. So let's go ahead and start coding. So first thing that you need to do is, there are three steps to this. One is an abstract class, and then you'll have your implementations of that, and then you'll have the factory itself. So there'll be three cases. I know actually, since it's an abstract factory, right? So you'll have four cases, I think. So you'll have an abstract factory, and then you'll have the factories itself. Okay, so here you'll have four cases. Let's start with how each of these would look like. So let's go ahead and start with our first implementation, which will be an abstract class. Now, since we're talking about abstract factories here, let's go ahead and create an abstract class itself. In order to create an abstract class, just import from ABC, import the abstract base class and abstract class, abstract method. I think that's the, yep. So we can go ahead and create a class. So this will be a class for the button and a class for the text box. Okay, so let's create a class button, and this will be actually ABC. So it'll be an abstract base class, and we can create an abstract method for this, and that method will be nothing but click. Okay, button has a click method. Okay, and this can be just something that's empty because it's an abstract class. So we can also go ahead and create the text box. And let's say text box is something that inherits from the abstract base class also. So I'm going to go ahead and create an abstract method. Text box has type attribute, for example, and there I can go ahead and do the three buttons here. Okay, so here I have created my base classes, the abstract classes. Okay, so this will be step one, abstract classes. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and create implementations of these classes. implementations. And what will the implementations look like? Well, there'll be Windows text box, Mac text box, Windows button, and Mac button. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that very quickly. So I'll go class Windows button, and this will inherit from button. And since this is an abstract base class, we're expected to define the click function, and that can just maybe print that but Windows button is pressed. Maybe that's the functionality we're going for here. Let's just keep that simple so that we can speed up with the code. I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this again, and now instead of the Windows button, I'm going to go ahead and do Mac button and change this to Mac button has been pressed. Okay, now I'm going to change and create an implementation for the text box also. So we have Windows text box. I can change that to that will inherit from text box as its class. So this will define the type function. Maybe type is not the right keyword to use, because I mean type is reserved, right? So that's not the best way to write your function, but it's all right. In this case, it'll be fine. So we'll say Windows is typing, for example. Okay, or maybe typing on Windows would be the more accurate term, but who cares. So then I'm going to go ahead and create a Mac text box also, and that will take something very similar. So the same type will be the same thing that's being inherited here. So I'll go ahead and say Mac is typing, not inherited, implemented, sorry. Okay, so we're done with our implementations. Also, two steps are done, and they're done well. Next, we have to create the abstract factory. So as we discussed before, right, rather than me having to create this every time, and this mismatch that we talked about here, maybe I can just do problem would be something like, in one case, if I do button is equal to Mac button, and then text box is equal to Windows text box, right? And that becomes a problem, is what we said. So rather than that, replace with something like toolkit, and the toolkit will have you'll put something like, so GUI toolkit, for example, and there you'd give something like Mac or Windows. Okay, and that will be our object here, right? So this GUI toolkit will be your factory, and that should be inheriting from an abstract factory. Okay, so that is why we're going to be coding our abstract factory. Right, so how will that look like? Okay, let's go ahead and create a code block, and then I'm going to go create a GUI factory. Okay, in this GUI there's going to be a create button property of self. Actually, since this is an abstract factory, it should actually technically be an abstract class. Therefore, we'll go ahead and implement that from C import. So we'll have abstract base class and abstract method. So those are two things that you have to import, and let's just inherit this from the abstract base class and add the decorator abstract method over here. So we will go create this button, and that cannot have any implementation. Let's go ahead and create another abstract method. So that will be the create text box, okay, of self, and that will do dot 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 nothing. So the abstract factory is also done. Now how will you create the factories? And that is the next case, and that will be something like class. So you'll have Mac factory, okay, and there you'll have, this will inherit from GUI factory. So now what the Mac factory will actually do is, it will create button, and that will actually just go ahead, we can do something like return Mac button, right? Similarly, we can, for create text box, we can return Mac text box, right? And then similarly, we'll have a Windows factory also, which imports from this, I mean inherits from this GUI factory. They're implementing the create button function, and that will actually be the same thing. I can copy paste this code here, and instead of this being Mac button, we can actually say Windows button. Okay, and similarly this will be Windows text box. Okay, so we've created two factories also. Awesome. Now how are we going to create a factory of factories. That is something that we have to see. Okay, and that is where the next case comes in. That will be fourth one, I think. So these are our factories, and we're going to be creating a factories. So this will be our facto. Okay, and in these factories we're going to be creating a factory of factories also. So that is what we'll call a class would be GUI toolkit. Okay, so in this class, let's say create a method or create toolkit. Okay, and that will have and choice, and that will be very similar to our factory. There we will say if choice is equal to mac, return mac mac factory. Okay, and similarly do else, we can return windows factory. Maybe else will not be the right case here, because if we're adding other choices in the future, it's better to leave this as elif. Okay, for now. So this will be our main factory of factories. Okay, so factory of factories. Now I can go ahead and run this. You can see that this code also goes through how you will use all of that, and that is where a driver code will come in. Driver code. So let us use all of these. So let me create a factory first, and that factory will be nothing but a GUI toolkit. So then I'm going to go ahead and create a toolkit for Windows. Okay, now from this toolkit, I am going to take my let's say Windows TK. Okay, so that is something that I take care. Similarly, I'm going to go ahead, in this Windows TK, I am going to go ahead and do the create button function, and I'm going to create the Windows TK. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create text box also. So this will be my text box, and this will be my button. Okay, now I can just do pb.click and button dot, okay, sorry, text box dot type, I think that's the right function. Sorry, create text box should be here, text box, and this should be create button. So there we'll have the click option. So what happens when I do this, you can see that Windows is typing, Windows button is being pressed. Similarly, I can actually create a toolkit for the Mac also. So I can just do something like Mac toolkit, right? Instead of Windows, I'll give Mac as my platform. And again, just like how I did over here, I'm going to go ahead and change this to Mac toolkit, or in, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and change this to just toolkit to show you how better that would look like. So that I can nail my point a bit better. Okay, so here when you're looking at this, so I'll just change this and this also. You see, and this works the same way. I'm going to do this also. You can see that the variable is still called toolkit only, and using the factory toolkit, we're just changing this parameter. From there, we are creating a text box and creating a button. Now when we're creating this button, we don't know which button we are creating. I mean, we're not explicitly or hard coding that part. That is just creating using a function, and then we are doing the type and the click. So in this case, Windows, that type function, that click function is working. Here Mac typing and Mac button pressing is working. So these are getting functions from two different class types, four different classes in total, which are again implemented from these abstract classes, and we use a factory, and we have some factories and a factory of factories also. So when you're doing this create toolkit, I'm creating this Mac factory itself and returning that to the user. Okay, so that is what the term factory of factories mean, and that is what this abstract factory design pattern is. I hope you're able to understand what this is. You can, if you're not able to understand, you can go through this code, try to read through what we're trying to do here. If you guys have any questions, you can always let me know down in the comments. I'll try my best to answer those questions. I hope this video helped you shed some light about this topic. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you, hit that like button. I'll see you in another video. Until then.